everybody, welcome back to the Fired Up with CJ show. We are continuing our conversation today with Allison Butke, and we're talking about her book, Setting Boundaries with Your Adult Children. Now, in the first part of our conversation, we talked about two and a half of the 6-step programs that Allison created in this book. Her 6 steps are for working with children and setting boundaries would be based on the acronym SANITY. So tell us so welcome, Allison.
Hi, thank you. Yes, there's those 6 steps to sanity. I often say that when we have boundary challenges, we're on the insanity of gerbil wheel. We're on the gerbil wheel of insanity. So to find sanity, we have to stop our own negative behavior. We have to assemble supportive people. We have to nip excuses in the bud. We have to implement a plan of action. We have to trust our instincts, and we have to yield everything to our higher power. So there's the SANITY.
Okay, so in our first video, what we did is we talked about stop negative behavior and assemble a support group, which I think are probably the 2 biggest and hardest steps. All of these are hard. And then in the first video, we were talking about nipping excuses in the bud, and you drew a distinction between those who are under 18 and those who are over 18, and the importance of having consistency and follow through, which is part of your implement rules and boundaries. So this video is really going to be talking about those steps.
Right. The nip excuses, implement a plan, trust your instincts, and yield everything.
Okay. So I wanted to do some role playing. So your child says, "Oh, Mom, I'm too tired. Things are going to change. You just don't understand my situation. I promise that next time, now that you bail me out, I promise that things will be different. It's really, or alternatively, it's not really my fault. It's because when I got caught in that situation, it was because I was with these friends, and then they did this thing. So this is the stories, excuses that happen. So I want to role play. So I'm going to be your child, okay? And I've just said that dialogue. What would you say?
I have to know if you're a child who is a minor or are you over 18? Because see, there is a distinction, CJ.
Okay, so tell me if I'm a minor and I just told you that story, what would you say? And if I was an adult?
Well, you have rules in my home, and there are things that have to be done. And you go to school, and there's no option for that. And if you decide not to go to school, here's the consequences. There's grounding, or the phone goes away, or whatever it may be. Then you've got to be clear.
But Mama, it's my friend who told me to do that. Mom, it's.
I'm sorry that your friend told you that, but you have the ability to make a choice, dear.
But it's not my fault. She was forcing me.
Oh, she was forcing you.
She was forcing me to not go to school. She's like, I'm gonna post all these things about Facebook about how it's gonna be a wimp if I didn't skip school and join the group to go to the beach.
Well, and that's a sad situation. I'm sorry that your friend is like that. And is how much of a friend is she? If she's if she's saying these negative things to you about what she's going to be doing to you if you don't follow that, and that situation is going to be tough, CJ. Even that scenario, because you're talking about you're talking about not cyber, right. You're opening up a whole other can of worms over how this child feels about themselves. So it really is, if their identity cannot be tied up with other kids. So much our young people's identity is things and people and the stuff you have and how good your stuff is. And I mean, it's just.
If I don't party, who am I going to be my friends?
And that's why that identity has got to come from somewhere else. And you've got to help that child have that strong self-esteem and identity younger, so they can make these kind of choices. It doesn't just all of a sudden happen at 16, 17, or 18.
Right.
It's a ramping up of, a dependency and an identity and other stuff. And they're mirroring us too. So if parents, are so caught up, and they are, a lot of parents are caught up in their careers and money and all they know is to dole out more money, and they haven't really built this strong structure identity in this child. So that's a whole other issue. But to be able to help your children make strong, wise choices it's a process. And if you're at that point now where they're rebelling and then they're gone, you're as a parent have some real issues with how you're going to respond to this. If they're running away or the options that they're taking have consequences. But as a minor, we also have consequences as parents. You can't just say, fine, go out and live on the street then. You don't want to live by my rules, go. You can't do that for a minor.
Oh.
And many states are even different.
Why can't you do that as a minor? It's illegal.
Arrested. You can be arrested as a parent.
Arrested out of what then? What would be I arrested for? What would I be?
It's going to be either, depending on your state where you're in. It's reckless endangerment. It's neglect of a minor. It's again, they're all very, very different.
Ah.
Encourage parents to call call the Child Protective Services and ask them. Say, I'm a parent, I'm having challenges with my child, I'm just trying to become a better parent. What are my options here when a child is continually truant, refuses to go to school? What can I do? Get help. That's that A. Get help. Ask somebody. Ask them what are your rules here. I lived in a state where I told my son that he could not be in my house high. So if he came home high, don't come home. But it got to that point, sounds horrible. He was like 17, but it was so I was overwhelmed at that time. I couldn't deal with this. Well, a police officer, knocked on my door and said, "Your son, you can't tell him not to come home. He's a minor."
Oh.
So it's like, okay, this is interesting now. So it was
right, because you're trying to create boundaries for the kid, but then the law doesn't allow you to. Wow.
Well, and you don't, and that was kind of a foolish thing for me. That was not a good choice for me to make. He's 17 years old, saying just don't. I was just frazzled at that point. After 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 5 years of it. He started running away from home at 13. I was
gosh.
I was frazzled. So, but I started from there growing and learning what can I do and can I do. So when you get a scenario about a minor age, it's different. And there's a real distinction there. So when they're beyond minor age, they're 18, 19, 20, older, there's different criteria.
Okay.
You're allowing them to live in your home by choice. And there are certain rules at my home, and and it doesn't need to be a heavy-handed, but it needs to be consistent, and you've got to follow through. Consistency is the thing. We say these things, then we don't follow through with the consequences.
Now, let's say that I've come home and I've been arrested for possession of drugs and smoking pot, and I'm now 21, and this has been a recurrent problem. I come home and it's like, Mom, I swear, like I don't really know. I don't even know how that stuff got into my car. It's not me. And I promise this time I'm going to change. I really am going to change. So please let me, please let me come back home or whatever. Please forgive me or whatever. I don't know what a kid says, but what would you say if or what would they say? Is that I don't even know what the
it really a lot of it depends how many is it the same old? Have they said this multiple times, or is this the first time? That's a key issue.
Okay,
here.
So let's say this is the first time, and yes, what would you say if it's the first time? I'm over 18. This is the first time.
I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt. I would say I hope that you have learned your lesson, that you can see how bad this can go. So in reality, if you do mean this, you're going to have to, you've got to figure out what this is. Be a united front with your spouse if there's two of you home. But if you're going to have to go to a counseling session once a week, or you're going to have to get into rehab, or you've got to figure out what that is and have that in writing, have a plan. That's the I in sanity, is implement an action plan, implement a plan. So if indeed you really mean that you're sincere about change and not making the same choice again and mistake again, because we all make mistakes, we get this, but here now moving forward is what you're going to need to do. And then if you don't do this, here are the consequences, and have those clearly defined and follow up with them. You've got to.
What would be an example of a consequence that maybe parents could try or talk about?
And at that age, it depends on, again, what you're paying for. If you're still paying for a vehicle, what leverage do you have? You're still paying for a vehicle, take the car away. Or if you're if they're living with you, you say, well, and they're rent free. Let's say rent free as long as they work. Or as long as they go to school. As long as they're going to college, they live here rent-free. But if you don't want to go to school, then you're going to pay rent. Here's the X amount of dollars you're going to pay to stay here. Now, if you don't want to pay that, then you have to move. You have to leave this house. and you have to find somewhere else to live. And you hope they're not going to push your buttons, to just sit there and say, okay, now throw me out. And some of them might get to that, which is a whole nother scenario, depending on, how the communication is going, what the relationship is like with the parent and child. If there's a respect there, or if there's just a child who's so rebellious and so angry, and there is, or the parent is so, completely confused and messed up that the dynamic is a mess. It depends on really the health of the two people
Right.
that are involved in this.
I see. So if the person's like, I'm not going to leave this house, whatever, mom, I'm not going to leave this house, then do you call the police and have them removed?
You can evict them if they're living in your home, yes. But can you do that? And will you do that? And should you do that? Those are things you have to get with your support group. Talk about what will you feel comfortable doing? Are you comfortable changing the locks on the door and putting a child through an eviction process and letting them find somewhere else?
Right.
What you may have to do that. If they are bringing drugs into the home, you change the locks. They can't get back in, and if they pound on the door, you call the police and they'll be arrested. Which is but again, you've got to walk through the scenarios. This is what I encourage parents to do. They're going through this. Walk through all the possible scenarios. You think so out of the box. This could happen. This could happen. And the most awesome or the most awful situation. Think that, okay, this could happen. If my son continues to use drugs, he could kill himself. Right. If he's on the streets, he could have overdose. And it's an awful feeling, but again, that's the choices he's making. I can't have him in my house and hover over him and put him on a police state and watch everything. I mean, I suppose I could, but that's not healthy.
Right.
Your home isn't a prison, where you have to watch it. So again, it's that mutual, respect for each other. You have to start from there and then develop a plan that is workable. Expectations are key. Are we expecting our kids to be perfect? Are we expecting them to just toe this line and never make mistakes? That's not fair. They're going to make mistakes.
And I think actually the thing that you bring up in your book, and that I think is that made me think when you were describing a situation, it's like yourself and your needs versus your children's needs. And if you keep on playing this game, and you mentioned this in the book, but I finally just clicked in an even a deeper way, is that if you keep on playing this whatever game and you're always giving to them, and you're never giving to yourself, at a certain point, I would assume that you're just becoming deplete of any resources, any coping resources, any love for yourself. And I think that probably then adds to the problem too. Is that true?
Absolutely. And the fear that we have for our money is being depleted, not only our energy
Yes.
and our emotional resources, but our financial resources.
Right.
I have parents that I talk to every single day, literally every single day, that are going through such financial issues today because they have spent so much on cars, insurance, cell phones, stuff. So their kids can have all the stuff that they never had, or they keep bailing them out, or they're afraid that if they don't pay for a expensive phone, they're never going to talk to their kids again, and so they pay, and now they're at retirement age with no money. And
no.
And no health insurance, no money, it's what do they do then? So there is a point where boundaries are not setting healthy boundaries is not selfish. We've got to get over that we're not being selfish. That we have to learn how to say yes with honest authenticity and no with firmness and love. That is that. So yes, with honest authenticity, not yes out of guilt, fear, anger, shame. Yes, you can live home because I don't like. That yes has to be out of honest authenticity, and then your no. Most of the time when we say no, we're so angry, we're upset. It's like, no way, the anger is just
right. We're fried and no,
Exactly. So no has to come with firmness and love, and that's why implement that plan, and that your kid is is a user and has been a consistent user, but you're allowing him back into the home. Okay, here's the plan then. Sue or Joe, you can stay here. You've got to go to this, and if I have it written down so they can see this, have them agree to it. If they don't want to agree to it, that's fine. You don't have to agree to this, honey. You don't have to, but you have to live somewhere else then. which is your choice.
Okay. So then this was the third option that you said. If you're a recurrent, this is a recurrent problem, then you would have a plan with maybe a contract that they would have to sign or something with specific rules. So what would some of those specific rules look like for if you are in that situation? Because you said you qualified it from first time to
Yep.
multiple. Yeah.
My son stayed with me a couple of years ago when he was on probation. He had an ankle bracelet. He had a year of probation, and I allowed him to stay at my house that year. And we had a plan written down. He signed, agreed to,
And what did your plan constitute, just so people know? Give a sense of it.
it identified the no drug rule.
Hmm.
No drugs are allowed in the home. Uh, he had to keep his room clean. There were household chores that we both had to do, and you're living here in this environment. No people, no strangers over to the house. If he wanted to go to group meetings and meet people, that's fine. I don't want people that could be drug addicts or people I don't know in my home. So
Hmm.
that's off the table. There's no entertaining in my house. You're welcome to go out to entertain. With that
Right.
that bracelet, he had to stay at certain level, a certain distance from the house. So it was only so far you could go. It was like house arrest is basically
Right.
what that. But there were certain things he had to do, and then if you didn't, you could opt to go back to jail, spend the rest of your parole time in jail. But if you want to spend it here, this is and it worked because I identified it, and then it takes it off our shoulders of the not knowing what to do. So whatever your issue is, if you can put it in writing, and the
Right. So
consequences.
it's like a plan with the consequences so that everyone knows, like, here's what to expect. If you do this, then this is going to happen.
The only way it's going to hold up, though, CJ, is if we're consistent with that, and we set this consequence, and if we're willing to stick with it. So we've got to make sure whatever consequence we're setting is something we're willing to follow through on. You've got to
Right.
deal.
Because if you say, like, I was thinking, I was writing something for my son. I'm like, if you fail out of school or if you or party too much, then here are the consequences. And I didn't really know exactly what the consequences would be, and it's like, well,
Maybe it's not paying for the next semester. Maybe
yeah.
maybe it's not paying for your books. Maybe it's you buy your own book. Books are a huge expense. So you got to know what that is. What you're willing to deal with.
Right, but it's like coming up with a list of things. I love that buying your own books, like something that's a small penalty. Because, like, I was like, buying your tuition, it's like, good luck finding 30 grand to pay. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of
And then
money.
following through on that, because if he doesn't, it says, well, I couldn't afford my books, so I'm flunking out of schools. I couldn't afford my books. Well, that's a choice you made. You have to keep. It's a choice you made, dear. And not not come from a place of anger or it's. I'm sorry for that. It's a choice you made. Why did
Right,
you make that choice? You have to ask yourself that then.
right,
It's a choice you made. It's not mine because you knew ahead of time that if you failed out of this class or whatever it was, I would not pay for books anymore. But
right.
see, the issue, this enabling issue, CJ, this is a great example, and it happens all the time. I was in the grocery store, Walmart, actually, a couple nights ago. Up one aisle, I'm watching this mom with this little child in the seat, screaming and yelling, I want this, I want that. And mom's going, no, no. Next aisle, she comes up. I pass her. You know how you pass people in the
Yeah,
aisles?
yeah, yeah.
So I'm passing her again, and the kid is still, now it's cereal, something else she wanted. Mom's going, no, no, no. Mom's getting a little bit more angry. Third aisle coming up, here's this little girl with her little toy, holding on this little toy, and she's wanting more. And I could see mom getting angry. Fine, just take it. Be quiet. Just take it. Something.
Ah. Oh, so what are you learning? If I complain 3 times, I'll get it.
Exactly. They're learning how to push buttons, and they're aware at a very young age that moms know doesn't really mean no. It just means no at that moment until I can either yell louder, cry harder, kick more, or be sad, or whatever button. And they learn real early what that button is for us. Which is why when I see a parent that is consistent, I will verbally commend them. I'll see somebody online that's saying, no, I told you, honey, you can't have that. And the child just screams louder, louder, louder. Mom's saying, no. And she'll, put her on and walk out. And I say, good for you, mom. You stuck with it.
Oh,
Good for
that's
you.
sweet. Yeah,
Good
that's
for
and
you.
as a mom, you so need that. You need someone to go, yeah, good for you, because you're kind of like, I hope everyone's. I'm not looking at me because my child's crying. I feel so embarrassed.
Exactly, which is again that motivation. Then you're going to give them what they want because you're feeling angry or ashamed or guilty or whatever. That's not helping this child. So if you've got to
Yeah.
pick them up and walk them out of a place, then you You got to do that, but you don't give in to them, and you know, and make, because then you're no. And yes, very
I know.
confused.
I've been in the car with the kid that's screaming their head off and going like, okay, and you just sit there, okay, okay, just like let the kid, and you just it's so hard because you're
Well, it's
sleep
like you're attached
deprived
to
and
the dog. The dog trainer. It was next.
right,
You know, it's the problem is the owner. You know, and
right.
parents. It's we the kids don't know. You know, they don't know really what is right and wrong because
Mm-hmm.
we don't follow through with it. So that they,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they learn from a very young age that we're not real consistent. We really don't mean what we say.
Yeah.
So we have to mean
So
what we
then they were
say.
kind of going into the implement rules and boundaries. So there's stop negative behavior, assemble support group. N is nip excuses at the bud, and then I think we're now flowing into implement and rules and boundaries. And it's like you said, you have to stick with it. And I think the hardest thing to stick with those consequences is if your child lives on a street. I've heard this so many times, like, oh, I'm afraid that my child is going to live on the street. And what I guess, because I'm sure you face those same fears.
It's well, my son has lived on the street several times in his life, and it's a horrible experience. There was a year where I had no idea where he was. I bought life insurance for him so I could afford to bury him.
Oh gosh.
And it was horrible. It was a horrible. It makes me cry today because I think what parent needs to go through this. But I didn't know where he was, what he was doing, and I couldn't afford to bury my own child, so I had to get insurance. You know,
Oh,
and
I'm
I'm
so
thinking
sorry.
and it's awful to know they're out there making those kind of choices. But it's it's choices they made, and I kept I gave him consistently gave him opportunities to come home to go through these process, and he would decide. But it got over the years, it got better, and he's drug free. He's been drug free for almost a decade now. So
Wow. Oh my gosh.
thing. So his drug addiction he's got handled, but we still have testy times in our relationship. It's hard, but he knows how far I go, and he knows I'm very consistent with what I say, and I mean it,
Right.
but he also knows I love him, and I want to help him whenever I can. I haven't just thrown the baby out with the bathwater, but I've gotten much more clear in what is my responsibility and what isn't my responsibility.
And it seems like that, and this is what you're saying, like you have to actually be okay with the potential consequences.
Yes.
So, are you okay if your kid gets thrown in the jail and thrown in jail or out on the street? And what were the options that you pursued before that? Like, what are some remedial steps? I think you had talked about a contract and providing clear consequences. Or when do you reach a point where you're like, sorry, you're just going to have to go on the street? I'm trying to figure out.
Well, so and they don't have to, the issue is that they have to go on the street because there's places they can find. There are shelters. If you're still using, you've got to check yourself into a drug rehab somewhere. You've got to find one that's either sliding scale, that's affordable. You've got to get help, or your choice is to live on the street. If that's the choice you make. It's
Oh, so like that's so living on the street is
yeah.
also a choice too, because you would. So there are you're right. There are shelters and other places. I think it's easier to just jump to our worst fear. Wait, I think we may have stalled out. Are you still there? Uh-oh. Oh,
Oh,
good.
there you
Okay,
go.
good.
There you
Yeah. So
go.
we
The choices, and it really is, actually say I'm all right with the fact that he's going to be living on the streets, or I'm all right, but this is a choice he's making because I could only go so far with these choices. I could only help him this much,
right.
or we've got to be. Here's what I also tell parents: if you want just to be that doormat or let anything happen, then just step back and let them do what they want to do and give them the space to do it in. If you really want to do that, great. You've got the basement apartment; it's yours, and you just do what you want to do. Which is
Right.
it's a choice a parent would make to say that. I don't know that it's definitely the best or right one, but maybe that's if they're so concerned about the child being out on the street, But again, if that adult child isn't doing anything, if they aren't trying to better themselves, if they aren't trying to get a job or get help,
Mm-hmm.
and some of those issues are real tough. It depends on the emotional and psychological health of the adult child.
Mm-hmm.
Able to work, or have we, are they at the point where they can't hold a job? Are they dealing with PTSD or bipolar or depression? And there's a lot of adult kids that are dealing with very serious issues. So that's the next book I'm working on for setting boundaries with adult children to address those kind of issues, those anxiety,
Yeah. Those are so hard. I've heard of
My son's
parents
dealing
who, yeah.
with PTSD from spending so much time in jail. An
Uh,
anxiety. There's a lot of issues there. So it's a different way. Their brain is thinking a very different way. So we've got to realize as parents how capable or able are our adult children. Is our expectation fair in expecting them to take a 9 to 5 job 5 days a week, get themselves there, up and home? Can they do it? And
uh,
some of them really aren't capable of that. So if that's the case, then what's the next step? Is it a group home? Is it education? Is it helping them become as able as they are able to become? So us as
right.
parents, we have to know really what our kids are capable
Yeah,
of.
so it's realistic in terms of, is this realistic for you to consistently hold this boundary? And is this also realistic to what the child is capable of? Because as
Exactly.
you were mentioning, like, if they don't have, if they haven't healed necessarily from their addiction, if they actually have PTSD or some type of mental issue going on, like, it may not be a realistic thing to go start. Some of your rules may not be realistic. I think actually I used to write contracts before, so even just saying, and we'll review this after a week to see what's happening, or 2 weeks, or after a month, that gives you kind of an out, because you sometimes you just don't know until you implement something whether it works or not. But almost having a clause in your contract to say, and we'll review after a
Well,
month.
and that is why, but you do have to give it enough time, and depending on the situation, that's why as parents we need to be talking to somebody, whether it's our support group or a professional. How can we craft this in a way that is reasonable, that is helpful on both sides, that's going to grow this relationship and help this child, and that's why every situation is different. It's hard to have just a blanket over this, because the developmental years are so critical for our kids, and so many things have happened in our lives and in our kids' lives that now we're at this point. It's very unique in how we address them and respond to them, and help or hurt them, and where they're at, where their ability is, and even consciously realizing that we're helping, because there is the issue that we may never be able to communicate with our adult children on a level of healthy emotional
Right.
communication. It's just, and then we've got to just realize that it's not going to happen. I'm trying to make this child think like a healthy emotional brain, but they're not there. They're either stunted in emotionally, their maturity level. Especially with drug users, that happens a lot. There's a very low, emotional maturity level there that they may never grow older. They may be my son's a 45-year-old young man, old man, so 45 years old, but there's times when I think he's like 18, 19 emotionally. So there's a whole different scenario going on with all of our kids, and how they're thinking, and so it's hard to do that on our own. It's why support group, but identifying it, we just have to identify, the plan, what we're willing to do, and
Right.
and
And
the
make it
right.
realistic. And then the other thing that you mentioned in your book, which I think is important, is so when you start listing out this contract, I assume there's going to be active debate, arguing, and negotiation. What does one do during that time?
Well, and nip excuses in the bud. There are
Right.
no excuses for it. It's not up for negotiation. I'm not sitting down at the negotiating table with you right now. This is what I am willing to bring to
Right.
the table. After a month or so, we will revisit this, but we're not in the negotiation stage.
Okay. So you just say, just so you know, we're not negotiating here. Don't
Right.
even try to do.
If you want to do it, it's putting power back into,
Right. What do you
hence,
think about this? Well, I don't like it. Okay. Well, what don't you like? And then you're back into the same.
you're on the gerbil wheel of insanity. You jump back on that gerbil wheel of insanity, and then you've got to stop. There's the S. Stop that. And develop something, but that's why it has to be developed out of from a calm place in your own heart,
Right.
not from that angry place. You really have to be conscious about this. I have a whole chapter on just that, implementing a plan of action, how you're developing it. I've got parents pulling out different steno pads and notebooks and writing down. I really want you to write down, think about this, and do all the worst case scenarios, and then come back to the table with what you're willing to do, and I use the analogy of when you buy a home and your bank doesn't just say to you, "Oh, sure, I trust you to make your mortgage payment every month. It's good. You just pay it when you can, and we're
Yeah, they
okay."
get the collection agency on you.
And that's a consequence,
Right. So we've talked about the four of your steps: stop, assemble support group, nip excuses in the bud, implement rules and boundary, and then the last two is trust your instincts and yield everything. So tell us about what trust your instincts means.
So often we know when something is wrong. We know this. We know. I had a parent that I talked to for the longest time. She knew her son was dealing, but she was in denial about it. Mm-hmm. The fact that he drove this very, very fancy Lexus that didn't work. That would have been, a key thing here.
Right.
He had, all these fancy toys and things, and the SWAT team came to her home and found this drug stash under the floorboards of her living room, a stash of drugs and money. She got arrested. It's her house. It's her house.
Oh, I read that, but why did she get arrested?
She was let go when they found out whose it was, but it's her home. She is living in this house. How could and he's got?
But it's her son that's stealing drugs.
They had to prove. Yeah, it's proof. That's proof who had it. We don't know. Police don't know. They just know there was a drug raid.
Oh no!
So here she is having to pay to prove herself innocent, and at the same time implicate her son, who really was the
oh my goodness. See, I thought when I read it in the book, I didn't realize that she got arrested. I thought that she could have gotten arrested because it was her minor in the house. No, she got arrested and thrown. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and as I say that, because I've talked to her over the years, we talk about this now. I may not have said she actually got arrested. I think I did, since she got arrested, because she wasn't willing to even talk about it at that point. But now it's like, you see, you've got to be very, very vigilant with what you're doing. You could be an accessory to a crime. If you're enabling them to operate or deal out of your home, you are now an accessory. Even if you're just guilty by association.
What does it mean to be an accessory to a crime, and what's the punishment for that?
Well, it depends on your state. It depends on what state you're living in, and what the substance is. If the crime is weapons or if it's drugs or what it is. But as parents, this is where the T is: that trust your instincts, trust the voice of the spirit, trust whatever it is that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and you say, boy, I just don't feel right about this, or I know something's wrong, but then we just ignore that. We've gotten out of touch with that, and many generations ago, people were very in touch with that more spiritual, intellectual, intuitive side.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. It's funny because my the friend that I told you that was divorced, and she plays her husband's the bad guy and she's the good one with boundaries, like all this. There's a whole intrigue around it, and they got caught cheating. And a friend of mine who's a therapist said, she knew. You know when your husband's cheating. You may not want to face it, you may not want to deal with it, but you kind of know. But it's really not. You're going to denial because you don't want to face the truth. But I think all of us, it's not even an ancient thing. I mean, it could be that we've lost our instincts and we're just, less instinctual as our ancestors. I think we just don't want to deal with we find out.
Yeah, because the consequences can be very dire. You can lose your marriage, you can lose your child, they can run away. The consequences are dire, but then so are the consequences of being in denial and ignoring it. So what are we willing to live with ourselves? That's
right. Right. So I'd rather, in her case, it was important for her to have a stable, respectable marriage that's not with divorce in her mind, right? Versus staying in a marriage when your husband is cheating and you kind of know, and I don't even know if this is true for her, but my friend who's a therapist who's worked with lots of married couples are like, the other spouse always knows. They just don't want to face the truth. But like I think you said, it's like you just have to figure out which of the two scenarios you're willing to deal with. Right.
And exactly. And that's where with the sanity steps, let's go to stop then. Okay, let me stop living in denial. Let me stop pretending this isn't happening. Let me assemble. Let me talk to somebody and get transparent about this and share this. What do I do? I think this is what's happening. I'm not sure, but how do I go forward? And nip excuses. No more excuses about why you can't, confront this person, or why you can't admit it, or why you're allowing, why you feel so low in your own self-esteem that it's okay for somebody to be cheating on you.
Right.
What about me makes me able to be, have somebody abuse me? You have to think these kind of things. What is it about? And that's shining the light again on us.
Right.
It's
why am I willing to accept this secondary kind of scenario in which I'm actually taking the brunt off of someone else's or whatever? Okay, so then the last, which I think is related to everything, is yield everything, because here I think what's interesting as we've been talking is that in order to do any of these things, you have to go into the unknown, right? Because when you were talking about your plan, there's like, look at every single worst case scenario, which we do, right? We look at all maybe he'll be on the street, maybe he'll get raped in prison, maybe he'll become a drug addict, and even he's a drug addict, he got weapons, like what, maybe all these things. And then it's like, there's so many unknowns, all of which are fearful. But then there's also these positives, like maybe he will 10 years later be drug free. So how do you yield to these realm of possibilities? Because I think even with my girlfriend, who maybe let's assume that she did know at some level and she didn't want to do it, she probably did it because it's like, what if I can't find another guy? What if I'm going to be alone? What if, it's the same kind of fear-based things and the unknown that leads us to go nowhere, to just stay where we're at. So what is the yield everything, and how can you let go? Because it's so hard.
It is hard, and when I say yield, it doesn't mean you're giving up. It just means that there's, I believe, it's just a bigger picture out there. Whether you're yielding everything to the universe, to God, to your higher power, to yield, it's just realizing there's a bigger plan out there that I'm just an infinitesimal part of, and I believe that plan in its inherent nature is good, and it wants goodness for us, and that we, our hearts can be healed, and that we can love, and that mercy and kindness and graciousness are things that we can experience and give to others. But sometimes we just have to step back and say, okay, God, universe, higher power, take it over, because I don't have the answers right now. I can't figure this out by myself. Help me find a good support group that I can talk to. Help me write a good plan out, and help keep my child safe if they're on the streets. It's just that yield that I can't fix it and control it all, and I've got to trust that there's a bigger power out there that wants my child and me to be healthy and in a loving relationship. So what does that look like? It means stepping back and just yielding and trusting that in the big picture, there's the goodness and mercy is possible, and it's a place to put yourself. That's why for me, my faith has been really important. I think faith in something bigger than us has to be important to us. Otherwise, if it all comes down to all the choices we're always making, that is sad, because I don't make good choices all the time. It's hard. Sometimes I screw up. So when that happens, I've got to believe that, okay, I'm going to just yield and jump back on.
Yeah, so the universe is good. I have faith that this is all happening for some reason. I may not be able to see it now, but over time it will be clear to me why this is happening to me, why this is happening to my son. And I would imagine that oftentimes when people are in these scenarios, I've had clients talk about being mad at God. Why did you put me in this scenario? Don't you love me? Aren't you a loving God? Did you go through something like that yourself?
Well, it calls it questioning. I really didn't, because my faith is so strong. It wasn't why did you let this happen. It was like, really, how am I supposed to live through it? What am I supposed to learn from this? What do you want me to learn that I'm not learning? It was more not that okay, God, you've forsaken me here. It's like, why am I so dense here that I'm not getting it?
Right. So, what am I not getting at this point? Please show me the way.
Exactly. It wasn't that I wasn't that I didn't think he was around or taking care of my son or me. It was that I just don't get it. I don't get what I'm supposed to be learning that I'm not. And that, for me, that clarity was, okay, I couldn't gain clarity until I stopped and stepped back and talked to my groups and quit making excuses for myself, and and got this plan and trusted that I was walking the path that I needed to walk, and not just giving it up. Just you don't just give up and say, okay, that's it. All right, I'm done.
Right.
Whatever happens, happens. You have to play an active role in your life. Mm-hmm. You don't have to. I think it's good when we can intentionally live our lives,
right,
intentionally.
Right. Yeah.
But and not just give up. But for a lot of us with boundary issues, we've given up in a lot of areas. We've given up because it's just too stressful. It's too painful. It's too hard. It's too hard on our own heart. It's too hard on our relationships. It's just easier to stay stuck. Mm-hmm. It's just easier to keep bailing out. It's just easier to keep the status quo. Now, is it really easier the longer it goes on? It really isn't.
Right.
It's so that trusting and yielding and just seeking strength. It was really wisdom and discernment. Now, how do I respond differently? How do I learn? What do you want me to do differently to help this? Not try to fix my daughter, my son, my husband, my friends. It's me. Help me fix my heart. Because our heart has to come from a place of healing, mm-hmm. a place of centeredness, a place of
genuine emotional, physical, mental, health and kindness.
Right.
And
Yeah.
where so many of us aren't there,
Right.
and it's hard. True peace and sanity is impossible without a healthy heart. So we've got a lot of broken. I talk about this a lot with my baby boomer generations. We've got a lot of broken-hearted little girls walking around in grown-up bodies. So it's fixing those broken hearts.
Yeah, so we've covered the 6 steps. I know that you're actually writing. You've written several new books. One that we talked about before about taking care of your elderly parents, of which I assume it's like these same steps still work, right?
Yes, I use all 6 steps in all of the books. There's 7 books in the Setting Boundaries series. And CJ, I intended to write this one for adult children. It was my heart issue. It was my catharsis. It was my therapy to develop these steps and walk through them. And they worked for me. So when this book came out, I had people emailing me saying, you know what, I don't have kids that are that I'm enabling, but I have a parent who I'm having challenges with.
Yes.
And not just the normal parent relationship. It was the parents that are gambling away their money, parents who are addicts, parents who don't want to keep jobs, parents who now the children are picking up the slack and they're now enabling their parents. How does that work? So that the 6 steps work for that one.
Right. And then you have one for kids with mental illness, and
that's
then
the next one. I'm going to because that's a real issue. How do we set boundaries with kids that have these emotional, mental health issues? So that's the next one. The one that just came out is Setting Boundaries with Negative Thoughts and Painful Memories. And a lot of that happens, what we're talking about here with these adult children issues, a lot of it comes from our places of negative thoughts and painful memories. Bad things happened to a lot of people when they were young. It is what it is. It sounds so simple, but the journey hasn't always been easy for a lot of parents, and they've carried that pain, that dysfunction into their adult relationships with spouses, friends, bosses, in-laws, neighbors, and we just keep rehashing those negative thoughts and those painful memories, the what ifs, the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and the sanity steps are holding that. The S in sanity for that one is stop hoarding your hurts.
whoa, that's a good one.
That's the subtitle of that book, How to Stop Hoarding Your Hurts. I watched a hoarding show and watched these people, get buried in junk, and I got to thinking, that's kind of how it is inside for a lot of us.
Yeah, I actually view it as when I talk to clients, I talk about a toxic tank. You actually have a toxic waste tank, and you need to flush it, because otherwise, after a while, the toxicity reaches a level where you can no longer cope with it. And if you don't continually flush out the tank, then what happens is it spills out into the world around you.
Yes, into our choices, into our relationships, and it's why we respond sometimes to the things we're responding, why we're making the choices we're making, because of that sick garbage that's just buried our true heart of who we are, our true heart and soul and spirit is just squashed.
Right. So that could be in an assemble a support group. This could maybe be the part that you start because, if, as you said, the first is self-inquiry. So it would be doing your own self-inquiry on what are the habits that you have, what are the addictive habits you have formed with your thinking. So is that what that book is about?
Yes.
I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Yeah, and how to replace some of those triggers and those negative thoughts with something positive. It's a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. It is really when these negative thoughts keep coming, how to really stop and intentionally identify and replace them with something else.
Did you ever think your life would be about this?
Never. And I laugh because I've become a boundary expert, and I swear to you, I am the most boundary challenged human being I know.
Yeah.
So for me, it really is all the time. I'm always, finding myself saying, okay, Allison, is that really a wise choice you're making right now? I self-check all the time now. It's how I am now. It's like, okay, do I need to stop doing that? Is this really a good choice? Am I making this choice from a healthy place, or is this a bad habit? Is it,
right.
And it's just becoming more and more aware of that, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
Like I said, with a lot of our brokenness, has just got to be healed. That scar tissue, we get stronger in those places, but it can be painful.
Yeah, this has been so helpful. So we've been talking to Allison Butke about her book, Setting Boundaries for Your Adult Children, and we've just literally grazed the surface, but provided an overview of lots of details that are in this book. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.